Hi there, welcome to Makerspace Knits. This is a Learn to Knit group. This is a Learn to Knit video. My name is Amy Rooney. I've actually never made a video about anything before, so if this sucks, I'm sorry, and if you got something out of it, awesome. When I was looking for knitting videos when I was first learning to knit, it was very difficult to find what I wanted. There are hundreds of knitting videos out there on the web. Most of them are very specific: how to make a knit stitch, how to make a purl stitch, how to do this cast on, how to do this bind off. And while they were all very helpful in their own little way, what I first wanted was a big picture view of what is knitting, why do we have it, why do we want to do it, what's good about it, how does it physically work. And until I could get that kind of stuff through my head, it didn't really do me a whole lot of good to just try and copy stitches. I kind of am the kind of person who needs to know how things work in order to do them. Otherwise, I get very frustrated. So if you're that kind of person, hopefully this will help you a little bit. If you're not that kind of person, no worries. If this is confusing you more than it's helping you, don't watch it. But maybe you'll get something out of it. So here goes. I made a swatch. This is actually probably a little bit bigger than a normal swatch. It's actually, I guess you'd put a piece of knitting. It's just to show you a couple different things. A very, very big picture. I'm not going to get into a lot of jargon, continental versus continental, knit stitching, English style, this, that, and the other thing. I don't think it's important to know all of that right off the bat. To have a better idea of what's going on without getting caught up in the specifics is always kind of what's helped me. So hopefully this will do that for you. So I'm zoom out a little bit just to show you. It's kind of big. It's probably, I don't know, 8 by 10 inches, almost the size of a piece of paper. I didn't think it was going to be that big, but I guess that's how things turn out. And you can see I initially started down here. You can see his little tail is still hanging off. And you can see these stitches are still on the needle up here and actually still attached to their ball of yarn. This particular swatch is done, hopefully you see two colors. There is a gray, kind of a bluish gray, and then there's this pukey yellow color that I'm not quite sure if I would ever use it to make anything, but it's great for swatching and shows a really good contrast, so that's why I used it. The yarn that we're using, the puke yellow one, is called, it's from New Zealand. It's called Zealana, is the company who makes it. It is a wool yarn. You can see a little picture of New Zealand, 2 ounces, 50 grams. It has a little bit of information here on the ball band, which you can kind of check out. There's a little bit of reflection here. I'll try and make it better. It tells you a lot of information about what's going on with the yarn, its kind of specifications, the blend number. It's 80% merino, and merino being a type of wool, and 20% Dalaka blend. Dalaka being another name for possum. I know Rob Brigatti was working with some of this yarn in a finer gauge. The possum wool is very popular in New Zealand because possums are a pest there. They're an introduced species and they kill a lot of birds and they mess up a lot of bird habitat by eating all the trees. So there's not a lot of things that kill possums in New Zealand. There's no such things as raccoons, coyotes, anything really bigger. So they become quite a problem there. So in that country, what they do is they hunt them. You get their fur, you sell it, and it makes wool. So maybe PETA wouldn't like that very much, but the birds in New Zealand do. The color, of course, color with a U because this is from New Zealand, just like it would be in the UK. Mineral yellow, or as I call it, puke yellow. The length, it gives you how many yards per 50 grams. It's 72 yards per 50 grams, which is pretty good. They call this a chunky weight and a 12 ply. Probably terms that you'll see: chunky, also bulky. 12 ply you probably won't see here that often. Usually they'll just tell you the weight of the wool. So that's that. The other wool we're using is the gray wool, which is also a Zealana wool. A little bit different. It is an 80% New Zealand merino and 20% cashmere blended yarn. A lot of merino is from New Zealand, actually. There's no shortage of sheep there, so they export quite a bit of it. It's in a lot of different wools. The care instructions you can see are hand wash with care, because this merino, this wool is not superwash. Superwash means that it goes through a chemical process which strips some of the stuff off of the wool that would make it very clingy and would make it felt. If you have wool, you should probably assume that it's a hand wash, unless it particularly says superwash on it. Even then, if you're knitting something superwash, probably going to want to hand wash it anyway. But not to get too specific, this also gives you a little bit of information. You can see that. It gives you 73 yards per 50 grams. The other one was 72, so this is very similar in weight. Also 12 ply. And it gives you a little bit more information that the other ball band didn't have on it. It tells you that on this size needle, you should get 13 stitches. So of course it's in metric, because it's New Zealand. So it tells you 13 stitches per 10 centimeters on 6.5 to 9 millimeter needles, which translates to a US 10.5 to 13 needle. This this swatch was knitted on 11s, bamboo 11s. They're 8 millimeters. But also I didn't get anywhere near 13 stitches, so I think my gauge is probably pretty loose. For the swatch, it doesn't really matter what my gauge is, because I'm just showing you some stuff. So that's a gray wool. So two different kinds, very similar weights, so you can see they blend together very well. This swatch, let's just look at what's going on here. Very generally, you've got a big piece of knitting. We start at the bottom over here. You can see the edge. Kind of looks like that. It's pretty nice. The bottom is this kind of like a ribby, nubby kind of pattern, which continues up the sides here. Gets a little bit different when we change colors. The middle part here is very, very smooth, and you can't really, I guess, you can't really feel over the video, but this part is very smooth and flat. This is very kind of ridged. It's ribbed for her pleasure. Up here you get into some color changing, which is pretty interesting. You have some different things going on in a swatch. You don't have to know what's going on, but you just have to notice what's going on. When the color changes come in here, you see a little difference in the height and the spacing of the ridges on the side here. These are pretty close together. These get a little bit further apart. You don't have to know why. You're just looking at what's going on. We have this big smooth part in the middle, but then we have a couple little weird furrows. It looks like little dents or little places where the stitches don't match. I'll give you a little bit more of a close-up on that. You can kind of see that. Kind of makes these parts seem raised a little bit, at least to me. And then on the top we go back to smooth knitting stitches. At least pretty smooth, but two of these things are not like the others. Two of these things don't belong. That and that. If you know what they are, awesome. If you don't know what they are, that's cool too. We're just picking out what's different and what we're noticing. So that's the front of this swatch. When we flip it over, it looks quite different, actually. So that's the front. This is the back. The back is very smooth, much like the smooth part in the front. A little bit different though. You still have this kind of nubby, ridgy texture on the edges, very similar to what you have on the front, almost pretty much identical. That smooth part on the front, on the back is also very smooth, but looks different. The front has these little, if you can see, they kind of look like V's on the front. V's or little seagulls. On the back, they're just kind of, I don't know, dashes. The colors also look different. You can see that kind of looks very stripy there. And check out these things. These are the opposite of what the furrows were on the front. So we had those three little weird valleys on the front. This is the opposite. There's actually three ridges on the back. So that's something neat. It's kind of like a bizarro world from the front. It's a little bit, it's the opposite. And then on the back, you can also see nice and smooth on the top, except for where we had those two little weird things on the front. We also have two little weird things on the back. So, just something different. If you want to look at the structure of what the stitches are, as I said before, they kind of look like little V's. If we look at the edge of the smooth part, where the color changes are, you can kind of see, we start from the bottom, a yellow, a gray, a yellow, a gray, little V's, kind of look like little birds. The yellow, you can see, is pulled up through the middle of the bottom stitch here. Then this gray is pulled up through the center bottom of this yellow. So it's kind of like a little chain that goes all the way up. And this is one column of stitches here. We call, I don't know, I call these columns and these rows, I guess kind of like Excel spreadsheet. But the rows you can see, and they all kind of blend together. The cool thing about knitting and why we like knitting is that it is, it's smooth. You can do a lot with it. The main thing that's very cool about knitting is that it is super stretchy. Like I can stretch this all the way out, boom, I let go, and it's right back to where it was. So lots of different kinds of cloth in the world. The kind of cloth that you sew, broadcloth. The kind of cloth that's crocheted. You can also crochet cloth. It's a little bit different looking. Knitting is really good for covering things that are not flat. For example, my abs, also my legs and my arms. We're not flat people. We're not paper cutouts. We are round, and we need circular, tubular things to cover our arms and legs, and we need a big tubular thing to cover our torso. So the fact you can actually make this, if you wanted to, you can knit this in the round in a circle, which a lot of you have probably seen. If you're looking at your socks right now, they're probably knit that way. A lot of commercial knitting, not to get into a lot of jargon, but this is stockinette stitch, this flat bit, like we said. A lot of commercial knitting is stockinette stitch. Most of the knits you'll see, most of the sweaters you'll see in the store, you'll also see that little tiny V's, although they'll probably be finer yarn than this is. They'll probably be tiny, tiny little V's versus these big ones. So knitting's awesome like that, nice and stretchy. If I stretch it out, you can kind of see what's going on with the stitches. If you look at the yellow ones versus the gray ones, if you look across a row, you can see that these stitches kind of just zigzag up and down, kind of like swirly. Pretty cool the way they're interlocked like that. So not only are they interlocked up and down, like we said before, but they're also interlocked side to side. If I pull this apart, you can see, if you follow the yellow around, you could see that it's just really, it's pretty cool the way that goes. One thing about knitting that's different from crochet, different from some other things, is that you have, the most recent stitches you have on the top are all what we call live stitches. So, which means that you can do something to them. Also means that if you pull one out, if this were not on the needle, for example, or you drop one, something somewhere will unravel. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but that's why they're live stitches. And there's some differences between knitting and crocheting. There's a lot of differences. There are some similarities, and we'll go into that a little bit. If you are a crocheter that has been a little bit afraid to knit or overwhelmed by having all of these live stitches, you can get over it. It's going to be okay. There's good things about having all these live stitches. You just kind of have to know how they work and know how to fix them if they fall off. But once you know how it works, it's not a big deal to fix them. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.